Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Rod Writer, and this week we're going to go way back in time and we're going to go way down into the oasis of your mind. Yes, because we are going on a psychedelic drama, because we are going to be taking a look back at the 1967 psychedelic drama counterculture movie titled The Trip. Now, The Trip runs for 85 minutes long. It is directed by Roger Corman. It is produced by Roger Corman. The script was written by Jack Nicholson. It is composed by Mike Bloomfield and his band The Electrical Flag. The cinematography was done by Arch Dalzell, and it was edited by Ronald Sinclair. And the stars of the movie are Peter Fonda, Susan Strasberg, Bruce Dern, Dennis Hopper, Salli Sacshe, Dick Miller, and Katherine Walsh. And boy, what a journey we have. Even though his films were predominantly B-movies and they were pretty much centered around horror films, Roger Corman was definitely a household name in the 1950s and the 60s. And like I said, though he specialized in directing horror movies, like Little Shop of Horrors, the original Little Shop of Horrors, not the musical, but the original horror film. He also did a few other movies that were in the horror genre. I believe he may have did Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. He's often collaborated a lot with Vincent Price and Peter Lorre. But by the time you get to around the late 60s, Roger Corman started to shift gears to direct a number of counterculture films. One of those was named The Trip. Now, The Trip was, of course, loosely based off of his own experiences of taking psychedelic counterculture drugs like LSD. And he decided to, arbitrarily make a movie based off of his experiences. Now, of course, some of his cohorts would also had experience with it, including Jack Nicholson, Peter Fonda, and Dennis Hopper. So the film was written by one of Corman's frequent collaborators, performed by a script written by Jack Nicholson. This is before Jack Nicholson kind of really started to rose to fame. Of course, he would star 2 years later in a movie called Easy Riders, where he would be nominated. I think he may have won the Best Supporting Actor category. I don't know. I wasn't alive in 1969. But I do know that Nicholson was nominated for Easy Riders. And it stars a few of Roger Corman's cohorts, like Peter Fonda, Dennis Hopper, and also joining them included Bruce Dern, Susan Strasberg, and another frequent collaborator, Dick Miller. So The Trip, although is not heavy in terms of plot or story, Peter Fonda stars as Paul Groves, who is a television director for commercials, and he's going through some really rough times. He feels like he is stuck in a dead-end job where he's not getting the prestige or the publicity like he deserves, because he's basically just directing TV commercials, while also at the same time he's also going through marital troubles, as his wife Salli her name is Sally, played by Susan Strasberg. Well, she has been quite unfaithful to him, and they are now a few steps away from getting a divorce. So, feeling like he's stuck in a rut, he needed to find some kind of antidote or some kind of ways to overcome his stress. So, to help calm his nerves, he goes to his guru friend named Max, played by Dennis Hopper, who introduces him to his friend John, played by Bruce Dern, who gives him his first taste of an LSD pill combined with apple juice, and thus starts the beginning of his first acid trip. Now, John is practically just sort of being like I guess you can say he's like a drug sitter to Paul. You know, just in case Paul starts to really get into delusional hallucinations, John is there to be sort of like the calm and spiritual type to sort of, like relax him a bit if he shall ever go off the deep end, so to speak. So John is there to guide Paul to make sure that he's okay and to look out for him if he should get into trouble. Because I guess when it comes to taking LSD, your mind is not cognitive, and sometimes you might you might hallucinate, you might weave in and out from our world and into your psychedelic world. So John is pretty much there to make sure that Paul doesn't go off the deep end, so to speak. And, knowing that this is played by Bruce Dern, who is famous for playing sneering villains, here he's kind of playing off kind of like the calm, laid-back type. And to reassure Paul that, hey, everything's okay. If there's anything you need, if there's anything you want, just let me know. Things like that. There are times when Paul will take something as generic and make it into something extraordinary. Like, who could forget when John gave Paul an orange, and Paul was like astounded by this orange, saying, "No, I'm not holding on to an orange. What I'm holding on to is life." But to us, it's just an orange. But to Paul, in his LSD trip, he's not holding on to an orange. He's holding on to life in all its glory, and all its beautiful, and in all its beauty. And it's one of the many contributors to the reason and the purpose for why we're here. When he goes outside and sees power cables, he's also astounded by what it has to offer, be it entertainment for us, be it for communication, to help us through our lives. He thinks it's a wonderful thing, but to us, all it is just wires connecting to our homes. But he sees more than that. Sure, there are also delusions. Like there was a time when he went skinny dipping in John's pool, and he was naked. But John, he didn't care if Paul was doing it, just as long as Paul doesn't drown. But all that whole while, John just remains calm throughout. Now, those are just some of the images that he sees in our world. But in Paul's world, in his LSD drug trip, there are a lot of images and stuff that are quite surreal. At first, the visions of Paul's mind seemed innocent and serene, where bright lights and colors and stunning visuals appear within his head. And every now and then he would go in and out of his trippy adventure and would find himself sitting in the same room as John looks on and remains calm and relaxed towards Paul. Paul starts to get the fondness in everything he sees and touches, like the touch of an orange, which brings a great deal of relief towards him. When Paul and John, why do I keep thinking the Beatles? Just kidding. They stepped outside to view the television antennas. Paul was deeply immersed with happiness. Whereas the average people could just say, oh, it's just television antennas. But Paul sees beauty in that. And yeah, part of, I guess, an LSD experience is you'll be seeing a lot of visions of innocence and serenity. But then after a while, things start to take a dark path. We see images of Paul in his trance. You would see him walking down a beach, and then he would be chased by hooded horsemen, half-naked women sporting bizarre face paint on them. And even though this movie isn't a horror film, we could still see bits of Roger Corman in his horror film experience with some horror images like the evil cackles of a possible witch nearby that we don't see but we could hear. And it could be quite disturbing and unsettling at times. And then there are also many scenes where Paul starts to get weary and the audience starts to become concerned if these hallucinogens that he's taking might kill him. I mean, John at times tries to slap him out of it without really actually slapping him, but just shaking him and trying to calm him down. And he also assures him to saying that, well, if he should die, just let it happen. Paul would eventually come back to his senses when all of a sudden his hallucinogenic trance takes a turn for the ugly worse, as he suddenly has visions of seeing John sitting in his chair with a bloody gash on his head as he lays dead. Paul eventually freaks out. He's still stoned. He is completely mind-fucked. And eventually, he is so far out of it that after seeing visions of his dead friend lying with a big gash on his head, Paul rushes out into the neon streets of the Sunset Strip, and he has this strange feeling that the police are after him. Outside on the loose, he ends up going to places where he shouldn't be. In one scene, you would see him like at a laundromat, and he starts scattering clothes out of a dryer that belongs to a woman who threatens to call the police, accusing him of harassment. There's also scenes where he's just so completely out of it that he's being seen at some kind of dancing nightclub. But fortunately, a compassionate bar waitress, tells him, I don't know, tries to calm him down or something. I mean, the guy is so fucking out of it that he actually crashes into, well, not necessarily like in a little sense, but he just walks into some stranger's home. He's not stealing anything. Don't worry. He's not stealing anything. He's not robbing or thrashing the place. No. He's just in the house and he crashes in a stranger's room, sitting on their couch. He awakens a little girl as they go to the kitchen and he pours her some milk. But then quickly leaves once her parents rush downstairs to see what's going on. I mean, the guy is just so completely out of it. But I guess this could be part of the experiences that Roger Corman and company had went through. I don't know. I never took LSD. I'm not a druggie. I'm straight edge. My hallucinations is organic. I'm just naturally weird. That's all. But him, he seems pretty much able-minded. But when you take LSD, you don't know what the fuck you're gonna see. Or sometimes you're just so oblivious, you don't know exactly what the hell you're doing. And then he wonders why the police are after him. And of course, if they find LSD in his body, well, he might be spending a couple of days, maybe a week or so, in the big house. So when he's like at the home of the guru and the drug sitter, everything's calm. But then when he's out on the prowl, he's no more mischievous than Frankenstein's monster. Except that he's not really actually necessarily causing destruction on anybody or causing any kind of inconvenience or anything mischievous or anything. He's just stoned. He doesn't know what he's doing. And maybe that's something that does happen when you're on a LSD drug trip. But I guess you would have to actually try these yourself to get a much better understanding. Now, whether this is real or surreal, all depends. Maybe people who have had experiences with this may have felt the same thing. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I never took it. But through it all, I don't know what you've been high on if you think that this movie will fulfill your mind with an engaging story, with a myriad of plot twists, because in the end, that's not what this movie is about. There's really not much of a plot. All it is just some guy taking LSD and going through the motions. Whether it's in the world he lives in, or in the world where all the LSD images are manifesting before his eyes. It pretty much goes on through your inner thoughts when taking drugs like LSD and stuff that manifests as your journey progresses. Whether Paul's journey is accurate or not is anybody's guess. Because immediately, like I said, I never took it. However, Roger Corman, Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, and Peter Fonda have all took LSD. And this movie represents what they experienced after they took it, recreating the events along the way. But then again, maybe people who may have took LSD maybe never really experienced much. Maybe they just fell asleep and nothing happened. Maybe they would just sleep for a day or two and then would wake up without really anything happening to them at all. I don't know. But I guess I could probably take the words from guys like Roger Corman, Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, and Peter Fonda. Since they took it, the only thing we could say is we'll take their words for it. It's kind of strange they casted Bruce Dern, since Bruce Dern had said that he never took it. But then again, I don't think their intentions was to cast Bruce Dern as John. Actually, screenwriter Jack Nicholson was up for the role of John. But I guess they turned him down instead. No question about it, the trip does invite its audience on this psychedelic adventure. And maybe something, an experience that even us normies will never forget. Well, I'm sure the people who have took it are normies themselves, but when you take the pills, the LSD, for a while you're not a normie. In some rather more discriminatory terms, you'll probably end up being just some delusional freak. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise for an experience you'll never forget, because it's just all too strange. Everything about this movie is just one weird scene after another that it weaves in and out. Plus we have Peter Fonda, who's like completely stoned out of his mind, but we just can't stop enjoying every moment of it. Through all the more laid back stuff to the more gritty, more disturbing stuff. But Peter Fonda did stand out. And he did a very serviceable job. And though we give praise to the direction and the script from both Roger Corman and Jack Nicholson, I also feel that a lot of credit for making this film intriguing is thanks to the cinematography by Archie Dalzell and the editing from Ronald Sinclair. They really knew how to put these images together. Sure, it might seem a bit archaic in their style and stuff like that, but then again, this movie was set in 1967. So yes, their methods are much more old school, much more complex than it is today. And aside from the amazing performance by Peter Fonda, it's the visuals that are actually the stars of the movie, as metaphorically they can be. They could be almost like characters of their own, the visuals. And sure, it might be a little glossy at times, but then again, glossy filmmaking was pretty synonymous with 60s movies. The quick cuts to each scene might distract some, but I think it works if the settings are beautiful, which they are. There's a lot of energy in this movie during this whole 85-minute duration. And if you ever get the DVD of it, There's definitely a cornucopia of great features that relate to the behind the scenes footage. Such features includes an interview with Roger Corman, along with the cast and crew, and a prologue, with an alternative ending that looked better than the anticlimactic one that was given to us instead. So overall, this movie is definitely not great that story-wise, but it's still a wonderful, wild, tripping adventure. And sure, it's out of date, but it fills in at a time when anti-establishment films were starting to come into fruition. That would definitely take a landscape in our society. When anti-establishmentarianism, yes, the longest, most difficult word to spell in the world, was starting to develop. People are no longer trying to become sycophants with with how society was structuralized for us. We were trying to break through that mold. Now, I wasn't alive in the 60s, but that was kind of like the counterculture. People were trying to, break out of the societal norms and try to relinquish their own creativity, their own process, without having to be grounded down and compliance to what these to what to what these draconian tyrants had been inflicting upon us since the beginning of time. It was our way to flip the metaphorical birds at them and just telling them, maybe not in these words, but maybe just in just layman's terms, and maybe to paraphrase, we were telling these draconian tyrants to just piss off. And though it might seem that Paul's journey might feel surreal at times, though I don't think I'll debunk the experiences Corman, Fonda, Hopper, and Nicholson had when they took LSD. If I can hear that these four people had been on these hallucinogenic trips and have had their stories told, the only thing I could say is I'll take their words for it, and maybe I'll believe them, since we're hearing from more than one party. We're hearing from multiple people about their experiences. And this is if more people say similar stuff, time goes on when we will believe them. And we do believe them. So definitely it's quite a wild ride for those who may or may not have taken LSD. Do I condone? Now, does this movie actually has a pro-drug message? It might seem that way. It might feel that way too. But I don't think it was actually going that direction. It might have had some influence. Because, back in the 60s, during the psychedelic era, everybody was swallowing these pills like it was candy. And it was like given out. This whole summer of love thing was a time of anti-establishment. When we were breaking barriers and telling capitalists to simply fuck off. This was their times to come up. Take charge of yourself and not let anyone keep you down. That was what counterculture of the 60s was like. I wasn't around at that time. I'm old, but I'm not that old. I came around during the time when people let out their froze stick, wore their polyesters, and started dancing to disco and all those boogie woogie bullshit. No, okay, I'm just kidding on that part. I mean, if you feel like disco music and all that boogie woogie stuff, you know, the more power to you. I'm not pissing down on anybody doing that. I'm just proving a point. Yeah, I was born in 1976, so I didn't come into the mix until another 9 years. There, I said my age. I'm an old man, so sue me. Okay. But if you want to see this movie for yourself to get a feeling of nostalgia or to get a better understanding of counterculture in the 60s, then I strongly suggest for you to watch this movie. You might be educated, you might be inspired, but as a rule, kids, don't take drugs. Okay? So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, that will be groovy. I'm just kidding. If you wish to leave a comment, that would be totally far out, man. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please chill out from the rudeness. You dig? And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and peace out.